Did you hear about the cheese that tastes better when you play hip hop?
I don't want to hear about it. I don't know what this joke is about to be, but I know it's not going to be fun.
Oh, it's not a joke. It's a study. They aged cheese with different types of music playing. And,
Are you serious?
And everybody voted that the hip hop cheese tasted better.
What's the deal?
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 Yo, what's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
Hey, what's the deal?
What's good, everybody? I'm Steve Discourse.
What up, y'all? It's your girl, Jay Callie.
Back again with another episode of What's the Deal? A lot has been happening this week. Top on everybody's agenda was the mosque shooting in New Zealand on Friday.
Yeah, it's really sad. Also, there's been a big scam with this college bribery. Your faves have been out here scamming the system, y'all.
Surprise. We got a major figure from the Catholic Church going to jail for sexual abuse.
There was a plane crash, another one. Ethiopia Airlines went down. We're going to talk about that a little later.
And how Toyota was settled a discrimination case for charging non-white customers higher interest loans.
And finally, we're going to jump into a little bit of scandal with the jaguar that decided to stand his ground at the zoo this week. I cannot wait to jump into that one. Matter of fact, can we get into it right now?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, so this past week there was...
Stand his ground.
This past week, there was another lady. I'm going to call her a fool. I know she wouldn't like that, but she got scratched up by a jaguar at the zoo because she was trying to take a selfie of a jungle cat over the barrier. Let me say that again. Over the barrier that's placed there to keep human beings safe from wild jungle animals. She decided, let me just reach across and lean in so I can get as close as possible to take the world's best selfie with this jaguar. And he jumped up and scratched the hell out of her, and she had to go to the hospital. Yeah, so now the big story. Actually, you know what? I've been hearing a lot that's just not true. People saying she went inside the enclosure. And at first I was like, how the hell can people just get in? She just thought she could jump into the enclosure, but that's not true. She just leaned over and like stuck her arm in with her phone trying to take a picture. But the fence is only 3 feet tall, so the jaguar just literally jumped up and clawed her, and then people had to like wrestle it off, drag her down and get her to the hospital. So she apologized to the zoo for all the negative press because people are like, "What the hell is going on at that zoo?" But it's like it's a twofer for real. Like, first of all, don't lean into the enclosure, but also 3 feet of fence for a jaguar. People shouldn't even be able to lean in.
Well, yeah, I mean. And first of all, the reason I'm okay laughing about this because she's gonna survive, right? Like if she died, that would be sad. But she, all right, everybody catches an L now and then, so it's all right. You gotta be smart. But yeah, she said I never imagined it would reach through the fence, and it's like, well, that's why the barrier was there, right? Like
it never imagined you would reach through the fence.
Right.
Like, who is this dum-dum that doesn't know I'm a fucking jaguar?
Right. You know I got a barrier right there, lady, don't you? There's you invoking on my barrier.
This actually isn't the first time that exact jaguar has scratched somebody. I think it was last year. This jaguar scratched up a man who also reached in trying to take a selfie.
Okay.
Yeah, so now they're saying like, okay, zoo at this point, yeah, people need to stop being dumb, but you need to like get a better barrier around your animals. Animals and human beings shouldn't even be able to come in contact with each other at the zoo. Like, it's just, your animals should be safer because they're going to want to put that cat down one day because dum-dums won't stop taking selfies with it.
I'm in favor of it. I say move the barrier 6 inches closer.
Why, Steve?
So I like chaos. I like a little bit of chaos sometimes. Yeah. And if it's over your own poor judgment and you survive anyway, then, hey.
No.
I just like a little bit of chaos in life. And this is a minor level of chaos, right?
Yeah.
Like,
We don't even really need to be discussing whether or not she's going to survive. It's literally a scratch on her arm. Like, it's non-life threatening. She needed to get some stitches, but that's it. But I really hope that this is a life lesson to her and to everybody else. Y'all, in the last, 5 years, we've heard so many stories of people coming in contact with animals at the zoo. There was a 2-year-old girl who got ran by the rhino. Of course, there was a little boy with Harambe. Chill at the zoo. Be safe at the zoo. You can't stand up on the wall. You can't lean over a little bit to get kind of closer. You can't stick your arm through the fence to take a better shot. You look at the animals and that's it. And you go home. They are not there. It's not an interactive place, okay? You can't interact with a lion. It's still a lion. Be smart.
Anybody listening to this, please interact. I would love to talk about your story on this podcast one day.
No, I really want y'all to be safer, and I need zoos to be safer, because as much as I want human beings to be safe, I really want the animals to not have to be killed because y'all mad that they attacked you after you came up in their space. Animals are territorial. Stay out of the enclosures.
Speaking of animals, you know what? No, I don't want to. I was going to make a transition from that into the next story, but
that would be so offensive.
It's not really. So we got to be serious now. On to the real work for today's episode. If you haven't heard about Friday evening in New Zealand's attack on a mosque, there was a mass shooting. 49 people killed doing their evening prayers on Friday night in New Zealand. And it's nuts. I mean, it's nuts for so many reasons. For the reason that this shooter fits the same profile of pretty much all the mass shooters that are popping out here with all these guns and just slaying as many people as they can. And the reasoning for it is nuts. And it's really, I don't even know where to start with this. So you've got a guy here has maybe this manifesto that they believe is his. It hasn't been 100% confirmed, but there's a lot of details in it that seem to match this manifesto that was posted online, 74 pages, called The Great Replacement. And there's not a huge ton of details about what's in it, but I mean, given his idea and what he did, killing these people, we can imagine what the Great Replacement means. And in a way, a lot of these white supremacists view, we had the Unite the Right rally in the far right, talking about we will not be replaced. Yeah. So whether he's talking about Muslims replacing him or having to replace them, I don't know. But either way, you have this guy, sick individual, and he kills all these people. There were kids involved in this. And he's a white supremacist
in New Zealand.
And we got to do something about this. And it's shocking that we still have to convince people that this threat of white supremacy is a real thing.
Is it shocking, Steve? Yeah. Is it truly shocking?
No.
Right. I want it to be, but.
Shocking is maybe not the right word then, but you know what I mean? So maybe not surprised, but still dismayed about it, troubled, sickened by it. I don't know. And here's the one thing I want to really get into, and I talked about this on Instagram yesterday, is a senator who came out, a senator in New Zealand, in the Queensland area of New Zealand, and he released this press release, and the first statement was basically like, I condemn violence and this was horrible. And then he spent the rest of this full page blaming the victims for this.
Talk about it.
And I mean, he essentially goes on with a lot of these stupid tropes about Islam being just 100% nothing more than a philosophy of hate in war. And I mean, that's ignorant for a lot of reasons, and we can all cherry pick scriptures and teachings from any religion and say, well, this is clearly terrible if you focus on that one. But the idea that this man can come out and say, quote, the real cause of bloodshed on New Zealand streets today is the immigration program which allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place. Let us be clear.
About that.
Let us be clear. Still quoting. While Muslims may have been the victims today, usually they are the perpetrators, end quote. And so they asked for it. He goes on later.
No, he did not.
Well, he goes on, he's saying, that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, implying that the children who died in this mosque are living by a sword, right? They live by the sword, right?
Whoa.
And again, I think the ignorance, to say nothing else, the ignorance of just casting the entire religion as somehow just completely violence and war based, because there are some people who claim to do violence in its name. I mean, it's just ignorant. But then to actually take 49 specific human beings, it's one thing like have that view and say that generally speaking, but we're talking about 49 people dead. These specific people, and this man spends a whole page making an argument essentially why they're not blameless in this. And
I just can't get with this whole notion that Muslims are innately violent and they believe in living by the sword and blah, blah, blah. I feel like this rhetoric has been debunked literally since like 2001. In 2019, how can this be your reason for saying, if he didn't get them, they surely would have got us one day anyway?
I mean, to me, it's about ignorance. I don't think you can have a hatred in this way. Yeah, I think you got to be real, and ignorance and stupidity is not the same thing, but it just makes me feel better to put it like this. You got to be real stupid. Right. You already cursed at the beginning of the show, so you got to be a real stupid asshole to think stuff like this and to justify these 47 deaths as the victim's fault, right? And I just think it's because, I mean, you've got probably something already in your head that's making you biased in some way, but you also don't, I think, have that real life connection to this. And so you can dehumanize these people and turn them into some neat little package that you have.
Right.
Because I think if they're literally in your house, if you know what, I was listening to a conversation on the radio. What show was it? Fresh Air, I think, and they were talking to some religious educator and a woman who had been a priest and trained in a lot of different religious views and everything like that. And what she said is, to really understand the world, you have to be a guest in the house and not a host. Meaning flipping your perspective, right? It's like it's not enough to have that Muslim walking down the street or living across the street or something, because people like this man, Fraser Anning, this guy who's justifying these killings, it's easy for him to have that white supremacist view where everything white is by default the normal perspective. As like the host, right? In that phrase, anyone coming in is in his house, is in his world, is subject to his perspective. And if you can take yourself out of that to where you're the guest, that's where change can really happen, and where ignorance can end, because now you don't have the choice. You can't take things for granted. Because you're the guest here, all the assumptions you make in your life, the people here hosting you probably don't have those same assumptions. Right. Now you got to check yourself at the door. You have to open
yourself up to being susceptible to learning new things.
And so that's what I mean when I say that a lot of this bigotry is just purely the worst, vile kind of ignorance. Because, I mean, and it gets worse. I mean, as always, left-wing politicians and media will rush to claim that the causes of today's shootings lie with the gun laws and those who hold nationalist views. But this is all cliched nonsense. So the media and politicians will blame the shooter.
Right.
And the shooter's philosophy of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant morality, but it's not the shooter's fault. That's cliched nonsense that it's the shooter's fault.
But this sounds clearly like a biased news source.
No, this is a senator.
Oh, the senator is the one that said this?
This is his official release.
Oh, my God. Are you serious? Who's the senator?
His name is Fraser Anning from the Queensland area of New
Wow,
Zealand.
wait a minute. I need to back all the way. This whole time, I'm thinking that you're reporting the opinion of the reporter.
No.
So the senator actually himself
This is a senator.
said these things.
Yeah. This was his official release.
I don't know how I missed that. What?
Well, to listeners who didn't realize that, hopefully I made it clear. But if you didn't, this is a sitting elected representative, and he's got real power, and presumably, I don't
believe it. I'm sorry, I can't believe it. A leader of this nation is saying these things about citizens of this nation. Is that what you're telling me right now?
That's what he was. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He came out, and this was his official. Now he starts off.
This is horrendous. This is like a Black Mirror episode.
Senator Fraser Anning has responded with strong condemnation. I am utterly opposed to any form of violence within our community, and I totally condemn the actions of the gunman. And then immediately, however, is the next thing, and then all that stuff I've been reading.
This is not strong condemnation.
No, it's not. It's
this
disgusting.
how New Zealand is? Is it? Wait, no, don't. This I might be wrong, and this is a total. Isn't New Zealand the one that has that whole like blackface parade every year?
I'm not sure about that.
Right,
We weren't prepared to research that.
No, I will look it up.
But now they have the prime minister has made a swift move to ban assault rifles. So it's not like necessarily the whole of New Zealand. And this guy might be a one-off, right? But the fact that this kind of massacre can happen out there is, a lot of this cultivation happens online. But
oh my God.
It's there under the surface, and people are susceptible to it. And to have an elected official come out so boldly, anything short of a guy's resignation has to make you really be concerned for your community if you live in New Zealand, that this might be more widespread than you want to acknowledge.
All right, no, I just looked it up. It's not New Zealand that does that blackface parade, but if it was, I wouldn't be shocked with these type of people in office, and that's crazy.
Yeah, so, we got to move on. But look, again, this stuff just comes out of that ignorance where you're really in a bubble, right? Literally. And a lot of people, when we talk about racism and white supremacy, a lot of non-white people find it hard to believe that this bubble really exists in that way. Yeah. And I think some people think it's almost like to apologize for them, to say, well, they're living in this bubble. And it's not. It's just, to me, it's just an explanation. We need to understand. We need reasons why things happen, why people do what they do. So it's not a cop-out. It's not to like give them, a way out the back door. But that bubble, you can really live in an insular world in a serious way. And this is the result of it. Yeah. So, let's move on. You got another story. Scandalous for sure.
Scandalous for sure.
Weighs a little lighter on the soul than this. So,
this is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But so earlier, I know I introduced that we were going to be talking about a big scam, bigger than Joanne the Scammer level scam, y'all. Some of our faves, might I add, have been involved in a big college conspiracy where they have been paying for all sorts of services, including having their kids be admitted with sometimes scholarships into some of the most prestigious universities in the country. Some of these scams have gone upwards of $25 million. I'm going to get a little bit more into the details of how this works as I develop into the story. But people like Lori Loughlin from Full House, people like Felicity Huffman from Desperate Housewives, all the way down to our big fave, Mr. Shameless himself, William H. Macy, have been paying for their students to get into school. They've been paying for test-taking services, just outright cheating on the test. Like, their kids will be going to take like the SAT or the ACT, but they would be changing the dates of when they would be available to do the test so that a third-party test taker could come in and literally correct their answers for them so that they could be admitted into top-tier schools. And then there's another man. Hold on, let me pull up my note real quick. There's another man. His name is William Singer. he has been pretending to have like some nonprofit organization and having them pay him directly for some of these services. Like, oh, this is an athletic scholarship for your child to be on crew. And it's like, no, this person has never been on crew ever. And it's just a way of washing the money. So you can say, this is what we were paying for. But in real life, you're paying him to scam and cheat your child's way into these schools. And then some of the kids were going on like social media being like, oh, I'm just here to party. And it's like, so not only did your parents pay millions of dollars, cheat the system, steal somebody else's slot who really, really deserved it, but now you're on the internet saying you just came here to party? Like, bruh, this is what rich people do to get their way in life. You already have so many advantages. You already have the world literally at your doorstep. You can pay your way through anything. Why, if your child, first of all, doesn't even have the credentials to go to this school or to go to college at all, also seemingly doesn't even want to, rob somebody else's opportunity who you know has to work 2 and 3 times as hard as you just to get presented with the option to do some of these things that you could just slide right into. It's so confusing.
Yeah, this is just wild for a number of reasons. And one thing I came across researching about this that was just like face smackingly stupid was an interview on page 6 from 2017, I think it was, of Lori Loughlin in an interview with her daughter there, talking about her parenting style. And she says, well, we're not the type who pressure our kids and insist that they get all the top grades and do all the best and like compete, win. We just want them to do their best, and that's fine. What she did left unsaid, I guess, is because wherever they happen to end up, we'll just pay the rest of their way. Like it's like it doesn't matter. Like you got D's or C's or B's, whatever she got in college, no big in high school, no big deal. We'll get you into the school you want one way or another.
Right.
Like,
I know a guy.
It's so like mind-numbingly what?
And then I read somewhere that they've already done some court cases surrounding this specific incident. So I read somewhere that Lori Loughlin in court was like very arrogant and unapologetic, kind of just like, all right, I mean, we did it, versus Felicity Huffman, who was kind of like, wow, I seem genuinely sorry. No, do I think that makes her right, or do I have empathy for her at all? No, because you're actually only sorry now because you got caught. Because if you didn't get caught, you probably would have paid all the rest of your kids everything just in the same manner. But just the point is, Lori Loughlin's just like, what? I guess we got caught. What you gonna do? I'll pay the fine.
Right. I mean,
really
they got
hope
the money.
They get jail time.
Now, her and her husband had paid $500,000, right? So clearly,
right.
I mean, how much is a year at USC? Like, you pay that much money just to get them in the door, and then
USC,
her daughter was on the yacht of one of the school's trustees when that news dropped.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Enjoying spring break. She left the party early. I don't know if it's needless to say, but in better judgment.
Yacht. First of all, the fact that you have that much clout at school to where you're on the yacht with the trustee of your university. A yacht. Okay, I'm done. Wow.
Yeah. So, this just raises a lot of questions in my mind. A, if these are elite organizations, what does this say about the real level of quality? Well, first of all, it's probably not very widespread, this kind of cheating, right? Because there's a lot of people with a lot of money out there,
right?
But there's not enough people with that much money, is there? I mean, like these test scores are $15,000 he was charging at minimum.
He made $25 million off of this. You can guess how many people, other than the 3 that I just named, have gone through this man to get. How many kids in college actually went through this person, paid for high test scores? Meanwhile, and the thing that makes it scandalous and sensational isn't, rich people paid for something they didn't deserve. That's not shocking. That's not news. The reason it's crazy is because it's like, we all know someone who deserved to be admitted who didn't because there were no more slots. Not, you didn't qualify, you didn't meet the standards. No, you actually just someone else is going to take your spot. To find out that there's at least, because this is how much we got caught with, $25 million worth of human beings in schools that did not earn it. That means there's $25 million worth of people who work their asses off, who are currently in community college or somewhere subpar from what they deserve to have. That's what's sensational about the story. You rob somebody's learning opportunity and possibly the stage that you set for the rest of their lives, because people don't realize how important it is, the university that you attended. When you send over your transcripts or your resume, that alone could get you the job. Who's in that big chair could say, oh my God, you went to USC? That's my alma mater. You have the job. Now you got to take, I don't want to name the type of school they're in because I don't want to be shady, but now you have to take something less than what you worked for.
Right.
It's not fair.
Well, but now, so that makes me ask another question then. I mean, what really is the value of that name recognition? Obviously, in some ways, that name, like you said, will get you right in the door because of a connection or because of that reputation, right? The prestige with that. But for these kids, if you're not taking this seriously and you needed all this help to even get in the first place, and it's not really help is not the right word for it, right? Then what you're getting out of that is probably nothing compared to what somebody else is getting at a less prestigious school who's really working and making accomplishments, right? And I mean, to me, I've always been a little bit skeptical of that idea that you got to get into the best school you can purely on the name recognition. Because I really just wonder, to some extent, it's more difficult to excel from one organization to another, no doubt. But overall, I don't know. I feel like you're going to get what you put in, more so what you're going to get just because of what the institution is, right? That's my view. And there may be, obviously, the quote-unquote worst college you can go to in the United States versus the allegedly best. There's a gap there, no doubt. But to some extent, it's got to be about what you're putting in that's going to result in what you get out, right?
Of course, there's always balance and there's always more to it than just like, oh, this school, therefore everything's great. You have to be willing to do the work if you're truly going to get something out of it. But like this is proven, sometimes you just have to know a guy who knows a guy. Right. Because clearly, like Lori Loughlin's daughter, who said, I don't care about school, I'm literally here to party, and who was clearly on a yacht when the news broke, like she's probably still going to get something out of it for as long as her parents are paying for her to get something out of it.
Right.
But
so this was just like a weird, rite of passage kind of thing. I want to go to college and party and experience it.
Exactly.
So, should all these kids get kicked out?
Hell yeah, they didn't earn it. They cheated on the test. What the hell? Someone else. First of all, let me just explain. When I took my SATs, I don't even know how it would be possible to cheat on this test unless it's like, they have to be like one-on-one sitting in the room with a third-party test taker who's just like, no, it's not C, it's B. Where's the proctor? Don't these places are serious about their testing, so it just seems like there's a big flaw in the system overall. Well, how are they able to cheat on a test where there should be an administrator, a proctor, total silence in the room? When the timer beeps, if your pencil isn't down, someone's coming to snatch that Scantron off your desk. Like, how do they have a whole other person sitting there giving them the answers? I'm confused.
Well, in some cases, there was a man who literally sat in and took the test on behalf of the students.
In some cases, yes. But again, how is this happening? SAT is a national thing. How can a celebrity have enough power to be like, we're going to override the system, have someone else take your test?
That money.
You can pay, which means there are scammers within the testing.
But I agree, they should all be kicked out.
Right.
Don't worry, you can take your credits and your weak-ass GPA with you when you transfer somewhere else. All right, last thing for me about this is it really just, because in the fallout from this, I heard a lot of journalism and a lot of interviews with either high school administrators or college admissions administrators and things like that. Mm-hmm. And what they talked about is that this is a reflection of the real pressure a lot of regular parents feel as far as their children's potential success in the future. Okay. And they really do have a lot of anxiety and fear about their kids getting the best opportunity they can because they're afraid of the lack of opportunities after the fact. right? If we don't get you into the best program that you possibly can, if we don't get the most. And this is sort of, to hear some, administrators call it, a very ubiquitous concern on American families. And to me, I always come back to money in the economy, because a lot of things that we do, political and morality and everything, comes back to how's our economy functioning. And I wonder, what does this say about the economy if college is by default, de facto, like the path to success, so to, as they say, right? But there's thousands of universities and colleges in this country, and we have families really concerned that unless they get their children up in an elite group of thousands or tens of thousands of students out of all the millions of college students, that their children are not going to have a path to success in the future. What does it say that we don't see an out for our kids to be successful without getting into this elite group? It's not enough to go to college with the millions of us. We're still worried our kids are going to be failures because that isn't quite good enough. Like, that's a big concern to me. Where are the jobs?
It's obviously concerning, but I really don't know. You get what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Steve.
Send your kids to trade school, man.
Hello? We
That's
can be on the same page. We need to really be reinvesting into trade school. That's been my thing. Y'all heard my rant about it probably about 6 months ago. I'm still on that. Trade school. Hello?
It's a good option. There's a lot of needs. And we got parents here willing to spend a lot of money to cheat to get their kids into college because they don't think there's any other way for their kids to be successful. And if that's how bad the job market really is, I'm going to tell you right now, there is a lot of need in trade work. There's a lot of need. I personally
think that undergraduate college is outdated. I feel like I'm probably part of the generation that's kind of realizing that for the first time. So unfortunately, I've already gone through college and stuff like that. But if I would have known what I know now 10 years ago, I would have been trying to get into a trade school. For real. I mean that. But you know what, Steve? We've been talking, and I'm talking my head into circles. These stories have been crazy. We just need to go ahead and take a break.
Let's unplug for a second.
Pop it out.
Sounds good. We'll be right back.
While we're on this break, we want to remind you, do not forget to share the podcast. Share it to all of your social media platforms, your Facebook, your Instagram, Twitter. Don't forget to use the hashtag #What'sTheDealPod whenever you share anything. And like and subscribe the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen. Thanks for spreading the love. You know we appreciate you. All right, y'all, what up? We are back from our break. You already know who it is. It's your girl, Jay Callie.
Steve Discourse.
Hey, so we're coming back with a heavy hitter, Steve. It's something crazy going on with Catholicism again. What's up?
Yeah, so earlier this week, the Cardinal George Pell, third highest Catholic clergy member in the world, convicted of 6 years in prison, sentenced to 6 years in prison for sex abuse against some children back in 1996.
What?
Yeah, 2 choir boys.
Oh my God.
And this is big, because the Catholic Church is a huge organization across the world. He's the third highest. He was the financial advisor to the Pope. And he's a 77-year-old guy.
Oh my God, to the Pope himself? Okay.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
So sentenced to 6 years. He's got to serve a minimum of 3 years and 8 months before he can be eligible for parole. And this is big just because he's the highest profile. I mean, there's only 2 other people higher than him.
Right.
So that's major news.
One of them is the freaking Pope.
Right. And that's major news, especially for some of those R. Kelly apologists who say, well, how come no Catholics get, well, they are. They're getting arrested and they're getting outed. They're being defrocked left and right. And what's crazy to me is, like, I mean, if you do an internet search, because Google doesn't pay us, so I'm not going to just shout them out and name drop them. If you internet search, they're going to have to pay us if they want that recognition, okay? If you internet search, like, priest sex abuse, like, any given week, you're probably going to get different search results because these stories,
Constantly.
these crimes are coming out one here or one there, or, uncovering troves of history of abuse that's been hidden. And it seems like every year, every other year, there's like a new area, right? In another city or another diocese or whatever is like a new expose of dozens or hundreds of abuse allegations covered up. And to me, like in some of the other denominations that aren't so centralized and hierarchical, maybe I get why there's not been like a massive uprising, but like the Catholic Church is a pretty strict, pretty regimented organization. And to me, the fact that there haven't been like mass movements and like public demonstrations, or like, I feel like I don't read about Catholics in mass, no pun intended, because they go to mass. My bad. I didn't mean to say that. But like, I don't hear about this like massive groundswell of pressure and outrage about it. And it kind of confuses me because you've got this ready-made group. This is a community here right now.
Right.
I mean, if somebody, we have protests in towns over, police violence and things like that. And we're all seemingly different people with different lives, and we live in the same town, but people get together for a lot of other political movements and protests. But you've got this clearly identified community of people with these really heinous crimes happening at a system-wide global level. And to me, I would think you guys would be out on the streets,
It's wild to me because it always seems like the same story. I have a question. I have two questions. Number one, this is a really random one. Is choir boy the official title of what they do? Because it's just so raunchy to me now. It's a shame that the term choir boy is now a raunchy term because of how often this happens. But like, is that what they're actually called, or are people just being saucy?
No, I mean, these two kids, I mean, that's how they're being identified at the time as choir boys. So, I mean, in some cases, they're like you have altar boys who assist in the service, and they go bring this and that, the host for communion and things like that, and they, maybe they hold up the book.
So choir boy is actually what
that's
they're called.
Well, there's different roles, I guess. So these two boys sang in the choir at the church, I guess.
Okay.
So that's
crazy. In my schema now, like of what I know about Catholicism, choir boy is a term to me that is now raunchy. That's really sad. But also, next question. 1996, why is he just coming up on these charges in 2019? Do you know?
Well, I don't really, but these things take a long time to come out. And I mean, we know that for victims of this, it's not just like, hey, this happened last week, let's take it to court, right? These can be long processes for people to come to terms with and even find the strength to come out. And their names have been kept from the public view. Mm-hmm. And so they still have anonymity there. Well, and I should say the one died in a couple of years ago, 2014, of a drug overdose. But there is still one of the victims is still living, and they made a statement. And a lot of people in this case, it's kind of melancholy, right? Because it's not justice in a way that makes anybody whole. It is a little bit of vindication, but most of the time and stuff like this, it's mixed emotions, right? Because you want this person to pay, but you're also not like dancing in the street and laughing about it, right? It's a heavy thing, but I don't know. To me, you have an organization that, honestly, just looking at the facts, at the core, is totally corrupt. It's totally corrupt, and I'm not saying you have to give up your beliefs as a Catholic, but if you're not in the streets saying, we need to like wholesale tear down this institution and rebuild it, from the ground up somehow.
It's something.
But it's a top down thing. You've got the Pope. He gives the decrees. This is what everybody follows the order, down to you who just shows up on Sunday for service. And I guess that's why it's hard to have a sense of agency if you're just a lay person and you just go to church, right? We don't make the rules, the cardinals and the bishops and then the Pope and all that does. And it blows my mind because it's so systemic. It's inherent in this system. And how old is the Catholic Church? How long has this been happening? Centuries, probably.
Yeah, this has been happening.
Right?
Well, we've known about it for how long? We've known about it forever. When I think about the Catholic Church, this is literally I think about the Pope, and then I think about child sex abuse. I'm sorry to my Catholics who are listening to the show, but that's just the truth. That's my truth. That's what I think about.
Right, and it would, to me, be a good look if there was a lot of publicity that people are pushing back to say, hold on, these are our kids, or these aren't my kids, but they're our fellow parishioners' kids, right? Like, what is really happening here? So, but I mean, the good news is that, like I said, if you do an internet search any given week, you're going to find 3 different cases, right? There's a lot popping up. So they're being exposed, but that's a double-edged sword. It's good that they're being exposed, but it's bad that there's always more supply of people to be exposed. So I don't know, man, but people in all these religious organizations need to get your house together, but specifically the Catholics, because you guys got a real structure to it. And it's like, I don't know. It continues to blow my mind that there's not just a major, massive movement to be kicking these people out. So what else happened? We had another headline grabbing story that the whole world was talking about.
It's actually a really sad story, and it's also a little bit of a crazy story. So this past week, there was another major plane crash. A plane went down. It was a Boeing plane, actually a 737 MAX jetliner, which has caused Boeing...
Okay, everybody, we're back. And here in this recording, you didn't know that we went anywhere because we stopped recording because we just went through some real harrowing stuff here.
I am a hero. No, I'm not. I'm a victim. I just stopped mid-sentence, which I know is really awkward, but we got up and literally ran out of the building. The building that we record the show out of had a fire emergency, and I was just like, Steve, what do we do? And he was like, we got to go. And I said, does this normally happen? He said, no. And I said, should I grab my stuff? And he said, most people say you shouldn't. And my fool self left all my stuff up here. So the whole time we're standing outside, I'm like, my makeup, my computer, my bag. I'm thinking about my stuff. But anyway, yeah, y'all, there was a fire.
We survived. We made it out alive and back in again. And we had a good time. Actually, we were. It was like team building.
Yeah,
there was about 20 of us down there. Oh man,
personalities and
telling stories and jokes about how were you ready to jump, or were you still trying to find reasons to stay in there and give away tickets or something? Or
should I play the filler music, or should I just kind of leave it dead air?
Run!
If you leave dead air, it's more dramatic. Luckily, our show isn't live, but some of the other people who record out of this radio station have live shows. So if you heard some randomness on the radio this morning, it's because we were all huddled downstairs trying to figure out if we were going to save our lives or our careers.
And we're back again, everybody. So believe it or not, right after Jay Callie finished saying that last thing, we had more technical difficulties. We had to leave the studio again. And due to everybody's schedule, we weren't able to get back into the studio to record until a little while later. Jay Callie is not able to join me right now, but I just wanted to jump back and touch on one last story before we wrap this episode up. We mentioned it at the top of the show. Toyota has come to a settlement on a lawsuit alleging that they discriminated against non-white customers who are applying for auto loans, financing for the cars. And so what happened basically is when you apply for a loan, they have a dealer markup. So you send all your information. They say this is the financing that they qualify for. And dealers have a little bit of leeway in how high they can mark that up if they want to, the interest rate that is, how high they want to mark that interest rate up from what the customer actually qualifies for. And so the Federal Consumer Protection Bureau was investigating into this and found that over the life of loans, thousands of customers of black, primarily black and Pacific Islander descent, got higher interest rates, totaling, anywhere between $100 and $200. So it's not very big, but they found a pattern that was systemic. And Toyota still really says they don't acknowledge any wrongdoing, but clearly there was evidence to show that something was going on. And so they're paying out a $21 million settlement to several thousand clients. It's a lot of people. So nobody's getting rich, and this wasn't like a massive scheme that they've uncovered, but it was at least some kind of pattern of bias. And this story is important to me, right? Because A, we have avowed racists marching in the streets and committing atrocities in these mass shootings, and we still collectively have a hard time acknowledging that racism is still alive and very well in this world, let alone in just the United States. And, second of all, if you go back, Barack Obama became president 10 years ago. And leading up to that point, people were waiting for a symbol like his presidency to say, aha, see the trajectory we've been on, racism is dead. Like, we're past it as a country. Because that's how the national dialogue seemed to be going. And now that we got to Obama, it was like, boom, turning point. This is a marker that we can point to in history. Well, now that you've got Obama in office, even during the campaign, his race was used to attack him. And, most of us who are not so naive knew during the campaign that racism wasn't gone. And we saw it in the way that his opponents attacked him. But ever since then, there's been a rise. And now, especially with Donald Trump's campaign and now presidency, there's been a huge rise in racism, in bigotry, in hate crimes. And this is a problem. And it's a problem not because it's always about mass shootings. It's not always about blackface and Klan robes and church bombings or anything else like that. Racism is as much alive today because of the implicit bias that exists in our minds before we ever act. And that's what this Toyota thing shows, is that, there was no documentation that this was a conspiracy to increase interest rates of non-white customers. It just happened to happen that way. And it wasn't random. The evidence was there strong enough to show a pattern. And so you don't have to be actively thinking, well, here's this black guy, I'm going to give him a higher interest rate. Or, here's this woman, this Hawaiian woman or wherever she might be from, which is still American, by the way. But, you're not deciding necessarily to give them a higher interest rate. But for some reason, coming into that interaction, something in your mind, in your thought process, enables that to function. And this pattern persists. Whether you can blame any one dealer or not, like the information wasn't reported that specific salespeople were giving out higher interest rates. So we don't know if that's the case even. Maybe it would be identifiable if the data is available to say, okay, who are these customers and who are the salespeople responsible for that? We don't have that information. Maybe the government does, the Customer Protection Bureau, they might have that, but it hasn't been reported. But the point is, these kind of things can exist at a subconscious level to the point where a person like me who even has these conversations is susceptible to these implicit biases. And it's about acknowledging and recognizing that they do exist, that they do happen, and checking yourself, checking your thought process. That's how it operates today, in addition to the very overt ways that a lot of white supremacists and nationalists are acting in flashy ways, with acts of violence, with marches in the streets, chanting, "We will not be replaced." That's why this Toyota thing is important, because again, per customer over the life of these loans is, $200. And if it's a couple years, 5-year loan, $200 is really not huge in the grand scheme of things. But the point is, it shows the ability to have this bias, to act on it, and then to be caught and it to be exposed and proven. And that's how we got to get better. People got to be honest with themselves. And more than just honest with themselves, you got to be critical. You got to be thoughtful. You got to be purposeful. You got to know the history that exists. You got to know where you fit in that history. And you got to know where we want to be going in the future. Because if you just say, well, I'm a good person, and put your head in the sand, you're not doing anything. You're not helping anything. It takes active work. It takes active thought. It takes active behavior change. And if it's not you, if you're above reproach on this, it's going to take you to open your mouth and have these conversations with other people. Because nothing's going to change if we just hope it will and wish it will and want it to. So that's not how things go. So I appreciate you listening. That's going to do it for this week's episode of What's the Deal. On behalf of Jay Callie, I'm Steve Discourse. That's the deal.
All right, people, thanks so much for tuning in another week. What's the Deal podcast?
You can follow us on social media
At Steve Discourse.
and you can catch Jay Callie.
It's Jay Callie, ITSJAYCALLI.
We got to send a big shout out to Clifford Cartel for composing our theme music. And wherever you listen to this, make sure you subscribe,
Family, subscribe,
write us a review,
share the podcast, subscribe to it wherever you listen.
share it with your friends, family, your loved ones. Heck, share it with your enemies. We don't care. Just help us spread that word. We truly appreciate it.